Welcome to our channel. Here we bring you mysteries, forgotten corners of old American history, and untold stories from the past. Every story is filled with suspense, strange events, and secrets hidden in time. So don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to never miss our next mysterious tale from history. The Vanishing Valley, Secrets of Roan Hollow. It was a sweltering summer morning in 1847 when Jonathan Carter first set foot in Roan Hollow, a remote valley tucked deep within the Appalachian Mountains. The air was thick, laden with the scent of pine and damp earth, yet beneath that ordinary summer smell there was something else, a tension, subtle but unyielding, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. Jonathan, a historian drawn to the forgotten corners of America, had heard whispers of a village that had simply disappeared, leaving nothing but broken foundations and uneasy memories. Curiosity, and something darker, had compelled him to follow the trail. From the moment he entered the hollow, an unnatural silence struck him. Not the gentle hush of untouched nature, but a deliberate stillness, heavy and expectant. Birds were nowhere to be seen, and the rustling of leaves seemed muted, as though the valley absorbed every sound. Jonathan's heart beat faster. He had investigated abandoned towns before, but this felt different. This wasn't abandonment, it was erasure. The village lay ahead in ruins, toppled cabins, fractured stone chimneys, and a crooked church steeple leaning mournfully over the overgrown square. No signs of life, no livestock, no smoke curling from chimneys, just silence, broken occasionally by the whisper of the wind. He paused at a half-collapsed fence, noticing strange symbols etched into the wood. Not Native American, not European, nothing he recognized. Something primal stirred in him, a warning he couldn't ignore. He walked cautiously, his journal in hand, sketching the symbols and structures. The fountain in the center of the square, cracked and dry, seemed oddly deliberate. Jonathan leaned over it, inspecting the basin, and froze. Faintly carved in the stone were words that didn't belong to the past. Leave while you can. The letters were jagged, recent. His pulse quickened. Who had been here, and why warn him? A rustle of dry leaves echoed nearby. Jonathan spun around, but there was nothing. Only the tall grass bending in the wind, and the uneasy feeling that he was being watched. He tried to dismiss it, muttering to himself, probably some prank by locals. But instinct told him otherwise. Everything about Roan Hollow pressed against him, a living force shaping the shadows. Night approached quickly. Jonathan set up a small lantern near the ruined church. Shadows danced and shifted, turning the familiar ruins into something almost alive. Then he saw them, figures at the edge of the tree line. At first he thought his eyes played tricks, flickering in the lantern's light. But the soft crunch of deliberate footsteps told a different story. Something, someone, was circling him. Jonathan whispered, trying to keep calm. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Silence. Then a voice, soft, almost part of the wind itself, whispered back, "You shouldn't have come." The lantern flickered violently, leaving him in darkness for a heartbeat. When it returned, the figures were gone. The weight of the valley pressed in on him, dense and suffocating. Hours passed without further movement, yet Jonathan could not shake the feeling of being observed. Every sound, every shadow seemed amplified. Sleep was impossible. As dawn crept over the horizon, Jonathan noticed something alarming. The path he had taken the previous evening to the square had shifted, subtly, impossibly. Panic surged, And then he heard the whisper again, clearer, behind him. "Stay forever." Jonathan understood. Roan Hollow was not just a vanished village. It was something older, something patient, something alive. And it had taken notice of him. He grabbed his journal, desperate to leave, but the shadows in the tree line moved, subtly reshaping the landscape. Panic clawed at him. Just as the first rays of sunlight touched the square, he saw a figure, tall, pale, featureless, standing in the middle of the path. It didn't move, didn't blink, and then it vanished. The valley exhaled. Jonathan Carter knew one thing: Roan Hollow was alive. The morning sun did little to ease Jonathan's tension. Every step through the hollow felt like walking on a stage set that had been meticulously crafted to trap him. The trees loomed taller, their branches twisting unnaturally, as though stretching to block his escape. He clutched his journal tightly, flipping through his sketches and notes, searching for any pattern, any clue that could explain the village's disappearance. He retraced his path toward what he thought was the main road out of the hollow. Yet every landmark he had memorized the night before appeared subtly shifted. The church, which had leaned mournfully yesterday, now seemed closer, its shadow stretching like a warning finger across the cracked cobblestones. Panic clawed at him again. How could the landscape change overnight? The valley was not just a location, it was a sentient force. He stopped near the remains of a wooden cabin, partially hidden by overgrown brambles. Something about it drew him closer. Inside, dust motes floated in the golden morning light, but more startling was the floor, covered with footprints. Not just any footprints, but a mixture of small and large, human shapes walking in loops, as if the cabin had been the site of some ritual. He knelt, brushing away the debris. The prints led to the corner of the room where a symbol was etched into the wooden floorboards, a circle enclosing a series of jagged lines, like a message written in a forgotten language. Jonathan's pulse quickened. He had seen symbols like this in old colonial journals, references to cults and secret societies, but nothing concrete. Could Roan Hollow have been the site of such a group? Or was this something older, predating settlers, predating anyone? The thought sent shivers down his spine. He took careful notes, sketching the symbol, and as he did, he heard it again, the soft whispering voice from last night. "You see too much." He spun around, heart hammering, but there was no one, only the brambles moving slightly in a breeze that hadn't been there before. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, yet he felt a compulsion to explore further. It was as though the hollow itself was drawing him deeper, feeding on his curiosity and fear. Moving cautiously, Jonathan followed the path that led to the edge of the village where the forest thickened. He noticed strange patterns on the ground, stones arranged in concentric circles, partially buried beneath dirt and leaves. The arrangement seemed deliberate, almost ceremonial. Jonathan knelt and traced the circle with his finger. As he did, the air grew colder, and the birds, if there had been any, fell silent. A low hum resonated from the ground itself, vibrating in his bones. He tried to shake it off. Rational thought, he reminded himself, was all he had. Perhaps it was a natural formation, an optical illusion, or the remnants of some long-forgotten ritual that had no power now. But as the humming intensified, Jonathan realized it was responding to him. Every movement he made seemed to trigger a reaction from the hollow. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement, a shadow darting between the trees. He froze, breath shallow. It was tall, humanoid, but not entirely human. Limbs elongated unnaturally, and the eyes, or what should have been eyes, glowed faintly,
reflecting the weak morning light. Jonathan's heart raced. He had crossed paths with stories of supernatural entities, but nothing prepared him for the sense of intelligence in this shadow, the unmistakable impression that it was assessing him, testing him. He stumbled backward, tripping over roots, and the shadow vanished. The humming ceased instantly, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed heavier than before. Jonathan realized with a sinking heart that the hollow had rules, and he had just violated them. Panic gave way to determination. He needed answers. Somewhere in the village there had to be a record, an artifact, a document, something that could explain the vanishings. He forced himself onward, toward the remnants of what looked like a town hall, its stone walls cracked and covered with ivy. The door, once wooden, had collapsed inward, revealing a dark interior. He stepped cautiously inside, lantern in hand. The air was thick with dust and decay. Faint outlines of furniture remained, though centuries of neglect had rendered most unrecognizable. As he explored, Jonathan noticed a bookshelf still partially standing. Dust-covered volumes, journals, and ledgers littered the floor. One book, unusually intact, drew his attention. Bound in dark leather, it had no title. He opened it, and the first page made him catch his breath. To understand Roan Hollow is to understand its hunger. Those who enter are marked. Those who linger are claimed. A chill ran down his spine. Jonathan flipped through the pages, realizing the book contained detailed accounts of the village's last days, entries from residents describing shadows moving in the woods, whispers at night, and an oppressive presence that seemed to consume not just people, but time itself. The last entry was dated just before the disappearances. We thought we could resist it. We were wrong. It watches. It waits. It wants. Jonathan's hands trembled. The warnings were clear, yet here he was, deeper inside the hollow than anyone had dared in decades. He closed the book and looked around. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the corners of the room, and the air grew colder still. The feeling of being watched intensified. Something outside the building moved, a shape slipping between the broken windows, observing him. He had to leave, but the exit no longer felt certain. Paths that had been obvious moments ago now twisted, folding back on themselves. Panic surged anew. Roan Hollow was alive, and it had noticed him.
Jonathan stumbled out of the ruined hall, clutching the leather-bound journal against his chest. The sunlight, though pale and weak, hit him like a shock after the oppressive darkness inside. His mind reeled with what he had read. A living valley, a hunger that claimed those who entered. But how could a place want something? He tried to think rationally. Perhaps it was the work of a cult, one that had once performed rituals here, leaving behind a psychological scar that still echoed through generations. Yet deep down, something told him this was older than any man-made faith. The air itself felt aware. As he walked toward his makeshift camp near the church ruins, the valley's silence thickened again. Not even the faint buzz of insects remained. His own footsteps seemed swallowed by the earth. The journal felt heavy, almost pulsing in his grip, as if something inside it breathed. He sat near his lantern, opening the journal once more. A page he hadn't seen before seemed to have appeared between the old ones. Fresh ink glistening faintly. Jonathan froze. He hadn't noticed this page earlier. The words were jagged, uneven, as though carved rather than written. "You were not meant to find this." He stared, heart pounding. He flipped the pages again, looking for logic, but the inked letters seemed to crawl, rearranging when he blinked. The valley's whispering wind returned, carrying faint echoes of voices. Dozens, maybe hundreds layered atop one another. They weren't random. They were speaking, chanting. Jonathan stood, scanning the tree line. "Who's there?"
he shouted, his voice trembling. The forest didn't answer, but something moved. Shapes, human silhouettes were emerging from the mist that had begun to creep along the ground. They were silent, translucent, faces blurred as though they belonged to several people at once. Their forms shimmered in and out, merging with the fog. Jonathan took a step back. "Stay back! I'm not here to hurt anyone!" No response. The figures simply stood, watching. Their silence was worse than any scream. Then, one of them lifted an arm, pointing toward him. The rest followed, dozens of ghostly arms rising in unison. Jonathan's chest tightened. He turned to run, only to find the path behind him gone. The church, the fountain, even the open clearing, all swallowed by the mist. He stumbled blindly forward, trying to orient himself, but every direction led deeper into the fog, where whispers brushed his ears. "He's one of them. He's seen too much. It wants him." His breathing quickened. No, this isn't real," he muttered. It's hallucination. Maybe the air, poisoned." But the pain in his chest was real. The cold seeping through his skin was real. The valley wasn't letting him think. It was feeding off his fear. Suddenly, he tripped over something solid. Wood. Jonathan looked down and saw a half-buried signpost. He wiped away the dirt and froze. The engraved letters read, "Welcome to Roan Hollow, founded 1784. But beneath it, freshly scratched into the wood, were new words. "Still here." Jonathan's breath caught. He spun around, and for a fleeting second, the fog parted, revealing the valley not as ruins, but as it once was. The houses were whole, the streets alive with movement. He saw people, men, women, children, laughing, talking, carrying baskets. It was beautiful, peaceful. Then one by one, their faces twisted. Their eyes turned hollow. The laughter became screams. The sky darkened in an instant. Buildings collapsed, devoured by a spreading shadow that poured like ink across the ground. Jonathan stumbled backward, his body shaking as he realized he wasn't watching a vision. He was inside it. The valley was forcing him to relive its death. He clamped his hands over his ears, but the screams pierced through. Fire erupted from the church's steeple. The fountain cracked open, spewing black water that shimmered like oil. The shadow grew arms, long, sinewy tendrils reaching toward the villagers, consuming them whole. And then, silence. The illusion, or memory, snapped away. Jonathan was back in the fog, gasping for air, knees trembling. He fell to the ground, clutching the journal like a lifeline. Pages fluttered open on their own, revealing a single line written in dark, wet ink. "Now you understand what it took." His voice cracked as he whispered, "What it took? What do you want from me?" The whisper returned, closer than before, echoing right beside his ear. "A witness." Jonathan turned sharply, swinging his lantern, but there was nothing, just the endless gray fog and the faint outline of the church in the distance. He needed to leave, now. If the valley wanted a witness, it would not let him go easily. He started running, his boots pounding the damp earth. The trees blurred past him, and the whispers grew louder, overlapping like a crowd pressing against invisible walls. The ground trembled beneath his feet. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The moment he did, he knew he would see what the hollow truly looked like when it fed. Finally, through the mist, he saw it, a faint glow, perhaps the edge of the valley, maybe salvation. His lungs burned as he sprinted toward it, but just before reaching the light, the ground split open beneath him. He fell, down, down into the dark. The last thing he heard before everything went black was the same voice, soft and endless, whispering, "You cannot leave what has already taken you." Jonathan's boots sank slightly into the damp earth as he stepped further into the hollow. The morning fog had lifted just enough to reveal the outlines of houses, or what used to be houses. Roofs had caved in, doors were missing, and glassless windows gaped like open mouths. Time had eaten everything but the silence. He paused in front of the old Roan Hollow town hall. The wooden sign hung by one nail, swinging in the faint breeze, creaking like it was trying to speak. The double doors were locked from the outside, an odd thing for an abandoned building. Jonathan frowned. He looked around, half expecting someone to be watching him. He forced the door open. The smell of rot and something chemical like burnt tar filled the air. Sunlight filtered through the cracks in the wall, illuminating rows of benches, old paper scattered across the floor, and a large mural on the back wall. Founded 1812, Roan Hollow, a place for all. But beneath the mural, Jonathan noticed something strange. Someone had painted over it with a layer of black, hastily, violently. Scraping with his knife, he revealed faint letters underneath. "Do not trust the valley." He stepped back. His heartbeat quickened. Who wrote that, and why? Outside, a distant rustle broke the silence. Jonathan turned sharply. No one. Only a scarecrow standing in a nearby field, its straw hands raised as if in warning. But as the wind blew, he swore the scarecrow's head turned slightly toward him. He shook it off. Maybe it was just the wind. He took out his notebook. August 14th, 1847. Entered the town. No signs of life. Structures decayed but intact. Found warnings suggesting deliberate evacuation. As he wrote, he noticed something else odd. The birds were gone. No crows, no insects, no sound except his pencil scratching. In rural valleys like this, silence was never natural. At the edge of town stood a church, its steeple leaning as if tired of waiting for prayers. The doors were half open. Inside pews lay overturned, and the altar cloth was burned in the center, leaving a dark mark shaped like a handprint. Jonathan felt a cold draft brush past him, but there was no open window. Then he saw the journal. It lay on the pulpit, half buried under dust. The cover read, Reverend Silas Crane, 1846. He opened it carefully. The first few pages were ordinary. Sermons, community events, birth records. Then, near the middle, the tone changed. Something walks beyond the ridge at night. The miners speak of lights moving in patterns, not torches, not lanterns. It hums. I told them not to go near the hills. Next page. Children missing. Livestock vanished. We prayed. Still the ground shakes some nights, faint but real. The valley hums as if alive. Jonathan felt the back of his neck tighten. The last page read only 3 words, written in thick black ink. They took everyone. Suddenly, the church bell above him gave a hollow clang, once, then twice. Jonathan froze. There was no wind strong enough to move it. He ran outside, scanning the horizon. The fog had returned, rolling in from the forest. Between the mist, he saw something. Movement. A dark shape, human-sized, standing near the old well at the center of the square. He shouted, "Hello?" No answer. The figure didn't move. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on gravel. The figure remained still, half hidden by the fog. Then, as the breeze shifted, he saw it clearly. A man, dressed in tattered 1840s clothes, eyes pale and unfocused, skin grayish like dried clay. Jonathan's voice caught. "Sir, Are you all right?" The man tilted his head, creakingly slow, as if bones had rusted. His lips parted, and a whisper escaped. "You shouldn't have come." Then he vanished, not turned away, not ran, just gone. Jonathan stumbled back, gasping. His pulse hammered. He turned and ran toward the tree line, tripping over roots, clutching his satchel. Behind him, the bell tolled again, once, twice, 3 times, echoing across the valley. He stopped only when he reached the old bridge that led out of town. The fog seemed thicker here, as if the hollow didn't want him to leave. Then he noticed something strange about the bridge. The wood looked new, not like the decayed structures behind him. Freshly repaired, and carved into one of the posts was a symbol, a spiral inside a triangle. He whispered to himself, "It's all connected." From somewhere deep in the valley, he heard a low hum, first faint, then louder, vibrating the air itself. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded alive. Jonathan's notebook slipped from his hand as he turned back toward the fog, where faint shapes moved again, dozens this time, silent and human-like, all facing him. He took one hesitant step backward. The hum stopped. Silence. Then, from the darkness, a woman's voice whispered, clear, close, impossible. "The valley remembers." The sound of that voice lingered in Jonathan's ears long after it faded. "The valley remembers." He stood at the edge of the bridge, the fog curling around his boots like restless fingers. He wanted to believe it was just the wind, but deep inside he knew the hollow was awake. Jonathan took a long breath, steadying himself. He had come too far to turn back. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the historian in him, the part that chased truth no matter the cost, wouldn't let go. He picked up his notebook from the ground, brushed off the dirt, and scribbled. Voices heard, unknown source, possibly auditory illusion, but directionally distinct. Valley exhibits abnormal acoustic resonance. He underlined the last sentence twice. Then, pulling his lantern higher, he turned back toward the heart of Roan Hollow. The fog thinned slightly as he reached the square again. The old well loomed at the center, its circular mouth ringed with moss and half-collapsed stones. Jonathan approached carefully. He could still see the faint outline of where the strange man had been standing before he vanished. He leaned over the well. A faint draft rose from within, cold and metallic. When he dropped a small rock, it took an unnaturally long time to hit the bottom, and even then, there was no splash, no water. He whispered to himself, dry well or something else. The wooden bucket lay nearby, its rope severed clean, not frayed, cut. He traced the edge with his finger. Whoever left it that way didn't want anyone lowering it again. Then he saw something carved into the stone rim. It started below. He stepped back, his pulse quickening. Below? Below what? He remembered the Reverend's journal, the part about lights moving in the hills, the old mining map, the spiral inside a triangle. His eyes darted toward the distant ridgeline. Maybe the key wasn't in the town itself, but underneath it. The Roan Hollow ironworks, that's where it began. He grabbed his satchel and made his way toward the east ridge, where the abandoned mines were rumored to be. The path wound upward, littered with half-buried rails from the old mining carts. And as he climbed, he noticed something unnerving. Trees twisted, as though bent by some invisible force. roots exposed and spiraling. The higher he went, the thicker the air felt, heavy, humming faintly. Then he found it. The entrance to the mine, a black wound in the earth, shored up by rotting timber beams. Above it, nailed to a post, was a rusted sign. Property of Roan Hollow Mining Company. Entry forbidden after sundown. The paint beneath the rust glimmered faintly, as if someone had tried to erase something else written before. He rubbed the surface with his sleeve, revealing faint letters beneath the warning. Do not wake them. Jonathan's throat dried. He stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. His lantern flickered, its flame bending backward as though resisting the tunnel's air. The deeper he went, the louder the humming grew, a low frequency that vibrated through his ribs. Old mining tools lay scattered, shovels, rusted pickaxes, a half-buried wheelbarrow. But there was something stranger. Handprints on the tunnel walls. Not just one or two, dozens, maybe hundreds, pressed into the rock itself. They weren't painted, they were embedded, as if the stone had softened at some point, capturing the impressions permanently. Jonathan felt his stomach twist. He touched one. It was cold, impossibly smooth. Then, beneath his fingertips, he felt a faint tremor, like a heartbeat, pulsing from within the wall. He stumbled back, heart pounding. No, that's not possible. But the hum grew louder, and for the first time, it seemed to carry a rhythm, almost like chanting, low and distant. He followed the tunnel deeper, rounding a bend until he entered a wide chamber. There, at the center, lay a spiral of stones, arranged perfectly on the ground, matching the symbol he had seen carved on the bridge. Inside the spiral, something metallic protruded from the earth, a hatch, bolted shut, covered in ancient soot. A metal plate above it read, "Foundation Vault, do not open." Jonathan crouched beside it. The bolts were massive, eroded but still intact. Whoever sealed this meant it to stay closed forever. He hesitated, then took out his hammer. The first strike echoed through the chamber. The hum pulsed once, like a heartbeat reacting. Second strike, louder. Third, the sound spread, rolling through the mine like thunder. Then, silence. He lifted the hatch. A wave of cold air burst upward, extinguishing his lantern. Total darkness swallowed him. Jonathan froze, his breath loud in his ears. Then, faint light below, flickering as if from torches moving beneath the earth. He lowered himself into the pit, one hand gripping the ladder, the other holding a small backup lamp. The air grew thicker, tinged with sulfur and decay. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a vast underground corridor, walls carved smooth as if by machines. But this was 1847. That shouldn't have been possible. In the distance, he saw movement again. Silhouettes, shifting, slow, deliberate. His lamp dimmed as if something was drawing power from it. He crouched behind a fallen beam, squinting through the half-dark. The figures were human-shaped, but wrong. Limbs too long, faces pale and hollow, as though molded from wax. They moved in unison, circling another spiral carved on the ground. Inside lay a black stone slab, engraved with strange markings that glowed faintly. The hum came from it. Jonathan's mind raced. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. The miners must have found something down here, something ancient, buried long before Roan Hollow existed. And when they disturbed it, He felt a sudden vibration beneath his feet. One of the pale figures stopped moving and turned, slowly, directly toward him. Its eyes opened, reflecting the dim light like glass. Jonathan held his breath. The figure took one step forward, and then another. The rest turned too, their heads tilting in eerie unison. He stumbled back, knocking over a loose pipe that clattered against the wall. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Dozens of hollow eyes now fixed on him. The hum intensified, so loud that it felt like it was inside his skull. Jonathan turned and ran, climbing the ladder as fast as he could. The moment he reached the surface, the hatch slammed shut behind him, by itself. The ground trembled once, then stopped. Only silence remained. He fell to his knees, gasping, staring into the darkness of the tunnel mouth. From somewhere below, faint and distant, came a single whisper, the same voice as before. "The valley remembers, and it's waking."